Hi everyone, today's lesson will be on relative pronouns and relative clauses. Now to understand this, we have first to study this sentence. The man who is talking on the phone is my father. Now in this sentence we have two parts. The first one is, the man is my father. Now this is the main part because we have a subject plus verb plus complement. And we have a complete idea, complete thought. The man is my father, so the idea is clear. And the second part, which is who is talking on the phone. Now this is a relative clause. A relative clause in English is used to describe a person or something. And we usually use a relative pronoun to introduce a relative clause. So a relative clause is a sentence which starts with a relative pronoun. And a relative clause cannot stand alone. It doesn't express a complete idea in English. So it needs to be used with another sentence, usually with a main clause, with a sentence that expresses a complete thought, a complete idea. So here we have the man is my father. This is the main clause, the main sentence, because the idea is clear. But we need extra information to understand who the man is. So we use a relative pronoun or relative clause, which is introduced by a relative pronoun. So who is talking on the phone is a relative clause, and the purpose or the function of this relative clause is to describe or to give extra information about a noun we have already mentioned. So the noun in this case is the man. And who is talking on the phone is a piece of information that we need to understand who the man is. The man who is talking on the phone is my father. So in order not to create unclarity, or in order not to make the sentence unclear, we need a relative clause. So, relative pronouns can be who, where, which, that, and whose. Now let's move to study other sentences like this. Now look at this sentence. A dentist is a person who fixes our teeth. A dentist is a person who fixes our teeth. In this sentence we have a relative pronoun who, which introduces this sentence here, which is fixes our teeth. Who fixes our teeth? So who fixes our teeth? This is the relative clause, and it is used to describe or to give extra information about the person. Now remember, we use who for people. Now when we want to describe someone or a person, we use who, especially when we want to give extra information. Now look at this sentence again. Elephants are wild animals which live in the jungle. Now this sentence contains a relative clause, which live in the jungle. So which live in the jungle is a relative clause which describes animals. So which live in the jungle. Now look, we use which, not who. Why? Because we we have an animal. So when we want to describe an animal, we don't use who, we use which. So which is used for animals. Another sentence. The letters which are on the table are for Emma. The letters which are on the table are for Emma. Now here we have which are on the table. So this is the relative clause which are on the table. And it is introduced with a relative pronoun and it is used to describe the letters. Which letters? The letters which are on the table. So I use it to determine, to make the object clear or the noun clear. So the letters which are on the table are for Emma. So here we use which because we don't have a person but we have an object. So when we have objects and animals, we use which to describe, to give more information about the noun, not who. So who for people, which for animals and things. Now we can replace who and which with that. So you can say, for example, a dentist is a person who fixes our teeth, or a dentist is a person that fixes our teeth. So that and who are the same in this context. Elephants are wild animals that live in the jungle. So that live or which live in the jungle. So both are correct. The letters that are on the table are for Emma. So here that and which are the same. So we can use that to describe or to give more information about people, animals or things. So there is no difference when you use that. So who, which can be replaced by that. Now let's look at other examples. In this sentence here, Shakespeare was a famous writer whose plays became famous around the world. Now here we have whose plays became famous around the world. So this is the relative clause. And we use whose to introduce this relative clause. So the relative pronoun is whose. Now whose plays became famous around the world describes the writer. So it gives more information about this person, famous writer. Now please pay attention to whose. We use whose for possession. Now possession means that someone owns something or someone possesses something. So here we have famous writer whose plays. Now the plays, so these plays belong to the writer. So this is a relationship of possession. A writer possesses the plays, or the plays belong to the writer. So when we want to express position, we use whose. Now whose is used in a different way. So we use whose between two nouns. Now look at this example. Writer is a noun. Plays is a noun. So we use whose between two nouns. A famous writer whose plays. Other examples can be my father whose name. So my father is a noun. Name is another noun. So my father whose name, my mother whose hobby, my uncle whose job. So here we have whose used between two nouns. So please remember this rule. Never use whose between two verbs or between a noun and a verb. So we usually use whose between two nouns. Now here's another sentence. This is the hotel where we stayed in our holidays. Now the relative clause here is where we stayed in our holidays, and the relative pronoun is where. Now where is used to describe places. Now the hotel is a place. So this is the hotel where we stayed in our holidays. So the relative clause here gives more information about the place or about the hotel. So we don't use when, we don't use who, and we don't use whose, but we use where. Now another example, Saturday is the only day when we can relax. So Saturday is the only day when we can relax. Now the relative clause here is when we can relax. And the relative pronoun is when. Now look at the noun here, it's day, is the only day. And day refers to time. So when is used for time. So when we want to describe time, we don't use where, we don't use who, we don't use which, but we use when. Saturday is the only day when we can relax. Now please remember these relative pronouns. We have seen who, which, that, where, when, and whose. So these are the most common relative pronouns which introduce relative clauses. So a relative clause is a sentence which is dependent, which is not complete, and it's used to give more information about a noun, or it's used to describe the noun. Now it's time for some practice. Here is the first exercise. Write a relative pronoun that, which, who, where, when, or whose to fill each gap. Now in the sentence, we should describe a noun using a relative clause. Now in order to be able to use the right relative pronoun, we have to look carefully at the noun, and we have to decide whether the noun is a place, a person, time, something, or an animal. Because if we can decide on the noun, the task or the exercise becomes easy. Okay, the first sentence, that's the house I was born. Now here the noun is the house. Now is it a place, a person, time, an animal, or something? Now house is a place. So that's the house where I was born. So we use where to describe places. That's the house where I was born. Number two, my auntie Ella. So here we have a person, my auntie Ella, is a journalist, is coming to visit next week. So here we are going to use who. My auntie Ella, who is a journalist, is coming to visit next week. Number three, people like outdoor activities. We love our holidays. Now here we have people, so it's clear we should use who. So people who like outdoor activities, we love our holidays. Number four, the early 1960s, the Beatles first started, was a very exciting time in popular culture. Now the early 1960s, here we're talking about an exact time. So in the early 1960s. So it's fine. So we should not use who, nor where, or whose, but we are going to use when. The early 1960s, when the Beatles first started, was a very exciting time in popular culture. Number 5. My essay on Shakespeare I found quite difficult, got a really good mark in the end. So here, the noun is my essay on Shakespeare. My essay. So this is the noun, this is what we are going to describe. My essay on Shakespeare. It's not about Shakespeare, but it's an essay on Shakespeare. So here, because my essay is something, it's not a place, not a person, not time, no, it is an animal, so it's something. So my essay on Shakespeare, which I found, so my essay on Shakespeare, which I found quite difficult, got a really good mark in the end. So here we have where for place, who for a person, who again for people, when for time, which for something. That's great. Now let's move to another exercise. Fill in the blanks with the right relative pronoun. Now the first sentence, March 18th, is a day people in many countries honor mothers. Now here, the noun we are going to describe is a day. And a day refers to time. So we have to use when. March 18th is a day when people in many countries honor mothers. Number 2, the old man lives next door has just died. So the old man is a person. So we have to use who. So the old man who lives next door has just died. Number 3, my neighbor, son is my friend, invited me to dinner. So here my neighbor, so this is a noun, son is a noun. So we have said previously that when we have two nouns, we use whose for possession. So here we have possession. So my neighbor, whose son is my friend. So my neighbor, whose son is my friend, invited me to dinner. Number 4, students go to the library. They look for information on their studies. So here the noun we are going to describe is library. So library is a place. So library is a place. So we should use where. Students go to the library where they look for information on their studies. And the last one, the last sentence, the camel is one of the few animals can live without water for a long time. So here the noun we are going to describe is animals. And we have seen that with animals we use which. So the relative pronoun we are going to use here is which. So the camel is one of the few animals which can live without water for a long time. Now we have finished our lesson on relative pronouns and relative clauses. Now I will leave you with a video where we have some people using relative clauses to describe different things. Enjoy the video and see you in the next video.
Hey Days, you remember that Mum was talking about putting videos up on her blog?
Yeah.
Well, she's got the first one up. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, right. Where is she at the moment? Peru, isn't it?
I think she's in Bolivia now, but the video's from yesterday, when she was on the Peruvian side of Lake Titicaca.
Okay, let's have a look. Hi everyone. Today I'm visiting the floating Uros Islands on Lake Titicaca. The people who live here have had the same kind of lifestyle for hundreds of years. The amazing thing about these islands is that they are man-made and made out of plants. The islanders pick the tall reeds that grow at the sides of the lake and use them to make the islands. Every 3 months they have to put down new reeds. If they didn't, the islands would sink into the lake. Oh, yeah, and as I said, the islands float, so they have to be anchored to the bottom of the lake with rope, like a boat.
Hey, it's really good.
The islands are kind of bouncy to walk on, but they're pretty strong. The Uros people make fires, which they use for cooking. Okay, there's a house made of reeds. But that grey thing, which you can see on the roof there, isn't very traditional. That's a solar panel. Technology gets to every corner of the world nowadays.
It's a bit like a geography lesson, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay, let's write a nice comment and like it.